Hi, everyone. This is Terry Arvisu Gonzalez, and you are listening to the podcast, The Tag Collab. This is a podcast where I break down a success, failure, leadership behaviors, both for myself and for everybody else, because we all are a work in progress. And today's topic is one that is about rejection and the psychology behind it, and why so many people who eventually become very successful had encountered levels of rejection. Why does that work? Why do some people take rejection as, okay, this is the end, and others take it as, this is this doesn't shape my identity, this is data, this is fuel, whatever. So there's a couple of reasons why at this particular time I decided to write and to talk about this. One is the Fernando Mendoza story about the Heisman Trophy winner. Just I continue to find myself going back to it because from what I know about him, I did not follow his career in Miami because I didn't live in Miami for a long time. But looking at the stats, looking how the world was telling him, no, this is not for him. And somehow miraculously, and not miraculously, because I think we discredit, we minimize his effort if we say that only. But I think there is a little bit of miracles in there too. God was taking care of him. Um, how he was able to overcome so much, right? And the other is, it comes at a time where I have a high school senior. Many of his friends and himself are applying for colleges. So we talk a lot about rejection and acceptance these days. And so today's article or podcast is called "The Psychology of Rejection: Why No's Shape the People Who Last." Why early rejection builds resilience, sharpens identity, and then creates the people who go the distance, while uninterrupted success can quietly set others up to stall. So I remember being in one of my early classes in my master's degree. We were looking at why certain people who see a lot of success eventually derail, right? Um, and the reason why that kind of stuck out to me was I had started in the business very, very young. I felt that I had achieved, success that most 16, 17, 18-year olds, maybe even beyond that, right, had um experience. I mean, I won some Emmys, and all of a sudden people were like, oh, she's an Emmy winner. It's like, no, I have Emmys, but that's not my identity. But anyhow, I'm also a type A personality. I remember in this course, they talk about how people who achieve a lot of success very, very quickly, type A personalities can become risk averse to it. And I remember thinking, mental no, I'm type A and I have seen some success young. I want to make sure that, I don't peak too early in life. I want to continue to evolve, whatever. So, anyways, um, so I'll get started reading this to you. But the management research I remember studying, right, about these derailers, and then also looking at the Fernando Mendoza story, and then looking also at um, some of the kids who have gotten into their dream colleges, some of them who have not, and thinking a lot about. I'm not super into sports, but my father always reminds me that the two greatest athletes of our time were both rejected early, and that's Michael Jordan and Tom Brady. And so, if we get into first, just quickly, derailing, what does that mean? In leadership psychology, derailing doesn't mean failure. It doesn't mean failure in the obvious sense. It refers to people who rise quickly and often brilliant driven type A performers, and then they stall or implode or lose effectiveness when conditions change. Research on executive derailment consistently points to a pattern: early, uninterrupted success, high external validation, identity fused tightly with winning, low tolerance for feedback, friction, or ambiguity. When setbacks finally arrive, which we know they always do, these leaders don't have the internal scaffolding to absorb them. They interpret resistance not as information, but as a threat. In other words, too many wins early can make you fragile. While the brain learns from, they always say you learn more from failure than you do from success, right? And let's talk about why that is. So, from a neuroscience standpoint, rejection and failure activate systems that success does not, right, in the brain. Wins tend to reinforce existing behavior, losses force adaptation. Rejection triggers error monitoring circuits in the brain, increased pattern recognition, deeper encoding of lessons, right? When you have an emotion that is tied to a memory or to an event, you remember it more. Some people call it like anchoring, right? An emotional anchor will make you remember it more. A recalibration of and lastly, rejection also triggers a recalibration of strategy, not just effort. This is why people who have faced early friction often outperform later, not because they were more talented, but because they learned how to adjust. Success will tell you, keep doing this. Rejection asks, what else is possible? The Fernando Mendoza question. So, what fascinates me about Fernando Mendoza isn't just the outcome, it's the psychology of persistence in the face of overwhelming cues to stop. When I recently saw someone who knows a lot more about sports than me and talked about his record in high school, how he only made it into um, he was accepted into Yale for a scholarship. So other things didn't pan out. COVID got in the way. Like, I'll put the video here in the article just so you can see it for yourself. I mean, overwhelming. This kid was being told, stop, no, go find another path. Like, this is not for you. And it reminds me of a saying that it's both in English and in Spanish, but for me, for some reason in Spanish, it just hits differently. And it's like with, without, or in spite of you, right? With or without you, I'm gonna do this. And so in Spanish it's con, sin, o a pesar de ti. And so I often use it where I say when somebody tells me no, I'm like, okay, that just means not gonna, I don't count on your help, but with, without, or in spite of you, I'm gonna do it anyways. But this kid, it's like, I would have gotten them. I'm amazed how he did not get the memo that was being sent to him. It was like, I don't really care that I'm number 130, I think, in high school. Like, it's just an incredible, incredible story. And I don't know that I honestly, with faced with that much adversity, wouldn't have been like, I think God is trying to tell me something else. Like, this is not for me. But anyhow, he didn't. And so he's just such an inspiration and worth looking at why this, why might this work so that we can learn for ourselves, right? Um, what was amazing to me is how somehow this kid was Teflon, much like Michael Jordan, much like Tom Brady. Like, he didn't internalize the no's. And I have a previous podcast that is about running your own race and how intimidating it can be, and you feel like you're alone and all stuff. So check that one out, right? But people like Mendoza, Jordan, and Brady share something rare, that they decoupled external evaluation from internal belief. Now, let me say that again. They separated external evaluation from internal belief. It's not delusional, it's discernment. Psychologically, they did a few critical things, right? They treated rejection as data, not identity. A no became information about the system, not a statement about self worth. Two, they separated timing from destiny. Not now didn't mean not ever, it meant not yet to them. The measured progress that number three, they measured progress internally. Effort, improvement, discipline, and resilience mattered more than the gatekeepers. So, and number four, they used rejection as fuel, not proof. Anger, disappointment, and doubt were metabolized into drive, not avoidance. This emotional regulation at a high level, it's also learned, not always innate, right? But it really is, I think, a very powerful statement to say that the rejection did not result in identity. They didn't make the rejection their identity. They used the challenge of the rejection to overcome it. Why this matters for our kids and for us, of course. Watching seniors apply to school is like watching identity formation in real time. You feel like, okay, is this the one that's going to succeed or this is the one that's not? And I keep reminding my kids that I oftentimes probably shouldn't say this, but I do, is, sometimes people who peak in high school, that's all they do is peak in high school, right? So for them, every email feels as existential. But here's the quiet truth we don't say enough. Rejection is not the detour. It is a training ground. The people who go the furthest aren't the ones that were protected from disappointment. They're the ones who learn early how not to be defined by it. And the same applies to career, leadership, and creative work. So, how to use rejection instead of letting it use you. If you want to replicate the psychology, not the outcome, but the capacity, start here. Ask, what is this teaching me about the system? Separate feedback from self-worth. Build identity around effort, not applause. Expect friction and normalize it. Keep a long horizon when the short one stings. Rejection doesn't stop the race. Only letting it define you does. And sometimes the greatest advantage that you will ever have is learning really early that the world's first answer isn't always the right one. So, to all you seniors trying, some of you getting accepted, congratulations. To those of you who have been rejected, remember this is not the end game. You may be building more stamina eventually than some of your counterparts. So use this lesson wisely. Till next time.